Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the part of the world you're connecting from. This is Eric Harless. I'm your head backup nerd here at Enable. Welcome, everyone, to the Cove Data Protection Are You Ready for Recovery Bootcamp. My name is Eric Harless. I'm your head backup nerd here at Enable, and I'll be with you guys for the next hour and a half as we go through some of the common missteps and resolutions that we've come across with partners when determining if they are ready for recovery. We've got a customer testimonial section, or customer interview section today we'll be going through, as well as taking you through a checklist or a health checklist of common obstacles to avoid when looking at or analyzing your data protection environment. So we've got a lot of content to get through in the next 90 minutes, so we'll kick this thing off. But before we do that, I want to make sure that the lawyers are happy. So as we're going through the session today, if there is any questions or inquiries that relate to features, functions, roadmap items that are not yet part of our generally available product, I'll do my best to answer or comment on those, but I will preface those type of things as forward-looking statements. Please don't make any of your licensing or purchasing decisions for the near future based on things that are not currently generally available or that might be in an engineering preview or alpha or beta state, as those features or functions could have a slightly modified release date, or the functionality could change or even not be released due to changes in the market or changes in direction. So for our agenda today, we'll do our quick introductions. We'll look at some of the typical industry causes of data loss and define those. We'll kick into our partner interview. That's John Joyce regarding his experiences with prepping for and going through Hurricane Ian. We'll go through a health check, talking about some of the common missteps and resolutions that I see around things such as proper documentation for recovery, security enhancements for your backup environment, making sure you've got the right selections and data retention in place, ongoing monitoring or managing and monitoring by exception. We'll look at recovery planning, recovery testing, missteps or common improvements, and then finally we'll wrap up with the recovery events themselves, how to get through those, your various options, and then we'll look at what do you do in a post-recovery scenario, knowing which sessions to go and restore, and what you'll do in order to connect your customers and get them back up and running. We'll wrap with some next steps. That's where you can schedule some one-on-one nerd time with me to do a health check of your environment, so we can look at some of these common missteps or expand upon this content in a context environment, an environment where the context is specifically your device set. Okay? For those of you who have not met before, my name is Eric Harless. I am the head nerd here for backup at Enable. I've been with the organization now a little bit over 9 years, actually almost 10 years in September, exclusively working on the Enable line of backup products through various names over the years. But I've got 25 plus years in backup and disaster recovery, business continuity, replication, high availability, those kind of things, mainly in product management, but I've also held roles in sales, support, and system engineering, and then of course my last 3 years here at Enable have been in this head nerd role. Ultimately, my goal in being a head nerd is to ensure that you are really ready for recovery. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through this special data recovery bootcamp. It's a kind of a new format for me. Normally we're going through a technical walkthrough and how to implement certain features and functions to get you the right end results. Here I'm going to take you through a real partner scenario with the help of John Joyce with his testimonial, and then we'll look at various tips and inquiries that you're going to look at across your devices to determine that whether you'd be ready to recover in a similar type of scenario. Some of the things you might think about, in the event of data loss, do you really know, the last use of your backup? When was the last time you logged in and looked at the dashboard? When was the last time one of your other employees or one of your other staff members logged in and looked at the backup sessions? When was the last time you were tested? When did you do a bare metal or a virtual recovery or even a file and folder restore for each of the systems that are under protection? If you were hit by a natural disaster right now, would you be prepared to get your customers, all their various impacted systems up and running, and what's the likelihood of success? Do you have the skill set, the manpower in place, or would you have to get that from somewhere else in order to bring back multiple customers in parallel if they were all hit by a large-scale ransomware attack? And then finally, have you ever been impacted by, say, a bad patch or a bad software update, something that bricked your system so that they weren't able to be booted and they required you to recover from an earlier point in time to roll back those patches that were applied? How would you do that in a large-scale environment to get your customers back up and running quickly? So lots of various scenarios, and the key thing here is that not all recoveries are created equal. Sometimes recovery for one type of data loss event is going to be a different procedure to plan and recover for a different type of data loss event. Looking at the causes of data loss, this is where I bring up that infographic or those donut charts that show you the different causes of data loss, and X percentage of customers that aren't able to restore their data within the first 48 or 72 hours may never get back into business. And of those that do experience significant data loss, they go out of business within X amount of time. I know you've all seen that particular scare tactic, that infographic or that chart showing you the different percentages and causes of data loss. And I went out looking for that. I wanted to show that kind of metric off and see what the real proof point behind that was. And I found in my Google search some interesting similarities. Here we saw this particular chart, causes of data loss, mainly due to hardware malfunction at 44%, human error at 32%, software corruption at 14, computer virus at 7, and then natural disasters at 3. And that's a nice chart, and you can look at that and go, okay, that might seem realistic. Hardware fails, and human error. People are making mistakes, accidentally deleting things, and but computer viruses, malware, those are probably a little bit higher now than they were, a year or two, or whenever this particular graphic was put together. So I started pulling additional versions, that same exact internet query, and I found another one, causes of data loss, broken out into different categories here, different attributions, different sources, although in some of these cases the sources were exactly the same, but the results were somewhat different. If you start looking at these, you'll see hardware malfunction, 44%, hardware failure over there, 40%. Some have theft, some have viruses in place. Others talk about software corruption at 32%. We've got a software corruption at 14%. You'll notice that even on some of these charts, even the prettiest ones, those numbers actually add up to more than 100% in some cases. So the only real commonality I could find after looking through dozens and dozens of these things is that they're probably just scare tactics. Some percentage, X percentage of all statistics are likely just made up, out of context, outdated, or they just can't really be reliably confirmed. And they're not going to always make sense in the context of your customer base, your demographic, your vertical that you serve. So for that reason, while it's nice to have those, it's nice to be able to give something that provides a little bit of context to your customer. Don't always rely on this as something that's a fixed value. This is going to be evolving and changing. Depending on how you ask the question, the data can be sliced appropriately to get just about any kind of answer you'd like, okay? Don't put too much faith in what you're seeing out here in these kind of structures. What I've done for the purpose of this particular session is I've categorized the causes of data loss into 3 different types. The first being malicious acts. So this is a bad actor who's distributed malware, virus, ransomware. It could be a bad actor, it could be a employee, sabotage. So someplace where there's data theft or specific deletion of an internal resource or an external actor, external bad actor that's caused the data damage. In this kind of scenario, you're going to want to recover the last known good session Possibly, if it's not due to malware, you're going to want to recover the last session where the data exists, but it might require a little bit of trial and error to go back and find when exactly that data was removed from the system. In all these kind of scenarios, though, your restore experience is going to be a little bit different than, say, where if this were a hardware error or a natural disaster that had impacted you. There's also going to be system failures. And when I say system failures, this could be hard disk failure. It could be overheating. It could be a power failure that brings the server down. Bad RAM in the system, causing software corruption or data corruption, bad RAID controller writing bad sectors to the disk, bad battery in the RAID cache, those kind of things. Now, system failures are normally things that you might be able to help prevent through keeping your systems relatively new, maintaining warranties on the systems so that they can be replaced at some of the early faults and alerts that show up. Looking at RAID configurations, you're looking at UPSs so they don't have hard shutdowns or major shocks to the system. But even in those kind of scenarios, even if you've implemented clustering, you can't do everything in order to fully protect the environment. You could have a hardware failure. Even in a fully mirrored RAID configuration, something could go down and basically block your access to the data, forcing a recovery. So system failures here encompassing those hardware failures, those software corruptions, things of that nature. And then finally, I've got natural disasters broken out as a separate category. Natural disasters, while it didn't rank in your polling, and that may just be because it doesn't happen that frequently, or you guys may not be in the path of too many different natural disasters, and you might even think, well, what is really a natural disaster that's going to impact me? Well, according to FEMA, that's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, there are 18 natural disasters that they categorize. That's avalanche, coastal flooding, cold wave, drought, earthquake, hail, heat wave, hurricane or tropical cyclone, depending on what part of the world you're in, ice storm, landslide, lightning, ravine flooding, strong wind, tornado, tsunami, volcanic activity, wildfire, and winter weather. Some of those are going to be more impactful than others. Some of those are going to impact different regions. I don't think any one region is going to get all of these. But it's not just the impact of being in the path of the hurricane or the tornado or that heavy-duty hail that brings down some power lines, that ice storm that brings down some power lines. It could be the residual effect of these natural disasters. The earthquake and or coastal flooding impacts supply chains and or resources, blocking employees' ability to get into the office and work, blocking the power to a facility, causing flooding, forcing air quality to be to the point that regions shut down access to their offices. So there's nobody internal to work or run these systems. And since you don't have access to your facilities, you may need to failover or run your environment from an alternate cloud location. You may also need employees that can work remotely versus in an office. So you don't have to be directly impacted by a natural disaster. You could be inadvertently impacted by it as well. And with a natural disaster, it's not necessarily always the direct impact that's going to cause the data loss or the downtime. It could be just a sheer fact of relationally being impacted. And these even though they happen less frequently, could have some of the greatest impact to your entire organization. Entire site loss, or no access to the entire environment due to no power or no utilities for your facility. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our guest speaker, or the interview that I conducted with John Joyce. John and his organization and his customers are based in Southwest Florida. They were impacted around this time. Actually, it was September 28th. I'm sorry, hold on, let's see, September. Yep, September 28th, 2022. They were getting ready for Hurricane Ian to plow through Florida. It's right around the time that we were planning or heading out to our Enable Empower event in Las Vegas. It did derail John and Julie's attempts to meet us at the partner show, but they had customers to take care of, outages to plan for, in the event that the storm did come across Florida, which it did. I've got a link to a Wikipedia link here to Hurricane Ian. If you want to look into the details or research on that one, look at the path, look at the cone, than some of the earlier projections that John will talk about during his interview piece. But this was a pretty significant storm. It had some major reach across the state and was one of the more expensive storms that we've seen in recent history when you look at the accumulated damage and costs of repair. So something that he had started planning for several days ahead of time as the projections started to point it in his direction. So I'm going to cut over to John here in just a second. So John Joyce is with CRS Technology Consultants. As I said, he's based out of Southwest Florida. His website for his company is crstc.com. And let me flip it over to that piece and let you hear it directly from John, how he got prepared and made it through Hurricane Ian with his customers. Okay. So John, first off, thank you for being a longtime partner. You guys have got a lot of devices in our console. I think you're using more than just Cove from a Enable product perspective.
Yes.
And thank you for that. I obviously have my Cove blinders on, so that's the part
so.
I care about the most. But using the stack of Enable stuff together, that's ideally what the corporation wants.
Yes.
But you're not bound to that, right? If you wanted to utilize something else, you obviously could. You're not tied or locked into any of these. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role? Just quickly, the organization, maybe some size or verticals. Mm-hmm. Where you're located, the kind of services you provide, like that elevator pitch as if I were a new customer that is thinking about signing on your services.
So I'm an owner here at CRS. We're located in Cape Coral, Florida. So it's southwest portion of Florida. Most people didn't know where that was unless they vacationed here until about 9 months ago, when suddenly we were in headlines for all the wrong reasons. Some other locales that are next door that may have Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach, Bonita Springs, Estero, Naples. These are all other in our kind of Southwest Florida, Lee and Collier County bubble, as it were. And then that Lee and Collier County area, about 90% of our business is split evenly between those two counties. We've got partners elsewhere in Florida and even beyond. But when we talk about in the context of Ian especially, the entirety of the impact zone was our backyard. So that's us and the folks we live with, work with, family, friends, the whole 9 yards. So as I said, I'm an owner here. My business partner Julie and I, so we are. I'm more on the technical side of the house. She's more on the operations side of the house. We both have experience in both, but I obviously come most directly from an engineering background. I started a small company. Now a lot of years ago, it feels like. That company merged with CRS in 2015 when I became technical director, and then I became an owner here a few years ago. So we serve no more than 150 partners. We do hard cap that. So we've got a team size of 18, and we just kind of where we've figured out our secret sauce lives is maintaining a certain team size that then serves a partner base of a certain size. That's always, subject to evolve. But, one of the things that we, transitioned through when I came here those years ago was we were closer to 2,000 clients or customers. And then I was directly involved in scaling that back. The company had grown explosively in the years prior to that. And one of the costs, we say around here all the time, what's the cost of a thing? And the cost of that growth was our service deliverable. I'll be transparent to a fault about that. Okay. So one of the things I was directly connected to when I came in was how do we walk it back very intentionally, not just, obviously we're a business. Walking away from business is not what most businesses are about. So there was a very key intentionality to those moves to say, we were also trying to be everything to everyone. You want a website, we'll find you a guy. You want to run some cables, we'll find you a guy. We stopped running cables today, someone fell through a drop ceiling. So I mean, there are just moments where you discover what you're good at, or at least you hope you realize what you're not good at. So that focus, very intentionally saying what do we want to be as a company, and our full name is CRS Technology Consultants. Consult is in the name for a reason. So we've wholly circled the wagons over the last year since I've been here, 8 years now. Around that consultancy role. We don't resell stuff we don't have to. We don't provide services that aren't in our core business. We partner with great companies that do those things. But at the end of the day, we are your consultant. We're not your superstore. So that's just us and why and how we do what we do, and who we choose to do it for. We're very selective about our partners. We've walked away from business. Anyone who's been around long enough knows there's good business and bad business. The dollars are not the equalizing factor. Some of the business we've walked away with had some of the largest dollar signs associated with them, and also the slimmest margins I've ever seen, if you could call them margins. So again, there's a lot of different types of business out there.
So definitely quality over quantity, categorizing risk over profit, right?
Absolutely, and the Cove piece of that is a huge bit of it. What is Cove to us today, or is what has been in a broader sense business continuity, is one of the things that we consider. We've talked with Steph and several other people across the Enable about our non-negotiables. We did a bit with her a couple of years ago about those non-negotiables, and when I talk about being selective about our partner base, and frankly, one of the tools I wielded as we whittled that customer base down to a true partner base was very unemotionally. We didn't burn bridges. We're not, telling people they're bad customers or bad businesses, but the first pass at that was, hey, we've maybe even had a great relationship over all these years. We're modernizing and changing our business. This handful of things, these actually brought down to 5 non-negotiable things, business continuity being one of them. That is us moving forward. If that's not going to fit in your budget, if that's not something we can do, no hard feelings. We're going to help you transition to someone else. That's just not going to be, part of our business. So, there's, the Cove Data piece, because again, Cove is our singular. You talked earlier about, a lot of folks have Cove here and Datto there, and maybe some Beam off to the side. We actually try very, very hard to not be cookie cutter in what we do. But when it comes to those non-negotiables, standardization is mandatory. So we have one RMM solution. We have one EDR solution. We have one business continuity solution. Those have not always been the same. We've transitioned vendor partners over the years as well. We're very happy to say that the vast majority of those come from some Enable vertical today, but that's not always been the case. And without making it a point, that may not always be the case. Businesses and relationships change. We're very happy where we are today and with all those products, and Cove being a tentpole of one of those. And that was never brought into. We've had very focused incidents where Cove has frankly saved our bacon over the years, for sure. It's why we continue to use the product and why we believe in it. We have never had such a broad exposure like Ian was last year, where Cove, amongst several of our other product sets, saved us as a company because it saved our partners in so many cases, and brought them in a very real sense from the wreckage.
So let me expand upon that a little bit, or get you to expand upon that a little bit. So Ian, Ian was last year. It's currently June of 2023, and we're getting ready to kick off, or we just kicked off, I guess, hurricane season for this year, which normally runs June to November.
You picked a good day for this conversation. We enacted our very first. Our outermost and most basic, but still our first hurricane protocol today, actually, on the 20th of June. So we've got a storm out there that is unlikely, but obviously due to recency bias, we're a little bit quicker to pull the trigger right now than we have been in years past. So we've enacted, again, our lightest and most basic practices, but we are still enacting them all the same today for the first time this calendar year with a tropical storm Brett that's out there in the Atlantic.
So the first time we talked, you kind of told me that, without a hurricane or without a named storm out there, your day-to-day is still pretty rigorous. You're checking backup statuses. You've got dedicated people that are monitoring those versus just relying on reports and alerts and things of that nature. Can you take me through, and you don't have to get super detailed in this, but can you take me through kind of the, as you go from, no storm into, Cat 1, Cat 2, imminent landfall kind of stuff, how does your day-to-day change, and what are your protocols?
So our standard run-of-the-mill day, so a day ending in Y that does not have a storm in front of it, is a business daily. So Monday to Friday, we have a dedicated team member. It's not their sole responsibility, but it is one of their daily responsibilities to perform a fleet-wide hands-on manual check of all backups across the fleet. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I say all backups. It's Cove. We have some not other solutions and backup products, but other things that touch that they still check, Azure related items, things like that. But from a backup and business continuity perspective, that is a end-to-end dashboard check. Of course, we look at alerts and thresholds and things we do have set up for ticketing, and that's still manually reviewed. But the most important component of that is a top to bottom review of every active. So we're not talking archive agents. Eric, you've seen it in our setup. We have an archive agent client where we stick stuff that we're just not ready to let go of yet. It goes there when people stop paying us for it. But I tend to be a bit of a data pack rat, so when it comes to that regard, so we hold on things longer than we maybe should. But those notwithstanding, every single active backup agent gets looked at manually daily. There's obviously differing responses to that. If it's under 24 hours and offline, it's monitored until the next day. If it's at or over 24 hours and online, a ticket gets manually created and it's investigated by a systems engineer that day. I mean, backups are one of the most closely watched single data points in our business. And I mean, if I had to, from a ticket volume perspective, that and printers might be the only thing we get a ticket about every single day. So does it truly? So we generate manually. We have several of our backups set up to automatically ticket certain events, but the vast majority of our backup investigations manually ticketed by that overseeing engineer that looks into them every day, because we found that over automating that process leads to a lot of white noise effect. The human eye is on it every day. We of course rely on the machines and the robots and the automation to help nudge us towards what we need to be looking at. We don't want to do work for the sake of work, but that human backstop's very, very important. Again, this is before we've enacted any special protocols. This is every business day ending in Y. We're doing that and looking at every single backup, every single agent, and then ticketing. One way that we've bifurcated that is the person whose responsibility it is to audit those backups is, funny enough, not the person that fixes any of them.
Really?
That's something we learned through many years, and if it's valuable to anyone, I'll touch on it real quickly. We as engineers love to fix stuff to our own detriment. Sometimes. Making the person doing the audit even come from a primary background that was found to be, again, anti the process. We want someone with the objectivity to see the problem for what it is and not for the zeros and ones of what it could be. So separating that, so that person we have the continuity of the same person, or at least someone from that department looking at it every day. But then those tickets are created and then collaborated with frontline systems engineers who work on those systems every day, because then they're going to be the ones that know, okay, yeah, we just did a project there this weekend and the migration likely created XYZ. Well, I don't want the auditor getting caught up in a project going on, but nor do I want a systems engineer doing the audit and spending 3 hours fixing a backup when there's 88 other backups that need to be looked at that day because they happen to know that there was a project going on. So separating those two responsibilities was a key, I think, towards keeping that objectivity, but also keeping it to be an efficient process where every single one of those tickets gets looked at and worked every single day amongst the handful of other things those engineers have to be doing every day in their roles and responsibilities.
Which, out of curiosity, which one is responsible for, when there is a failure? Who's responsible for correcting it? And if it's there the next day, and it's there the next day, and it's there the next day.
Great question. So we do have procedures in place so that person, doing the daily check, we call them the bucks, the backup checks. So the person who's doing that daily buck is, we've got a running spreadsheet. Again, it's very, sounds like an archaic manual process, but it works for us. So everything from the day prior is carried forward to the next day. So we're doing that to look for carryover trends. So we can see, that row with all that running data does not get cleared until we've seen successive green backups, and then it gets taken off. Now, again, because it all gets ticketed into our PSA, even if something does get cleared out and cleaned up, and then a week later it comes back, that's part of that process to do it. When was the last time this ticketed? So we can bring forward that history so we're not just repeating the same insanity machine over and over again. So we try not to reinvent the wheel too many times over. We are humans, it happens. But so back to your question about roles and responsibilities, the responsibilities of the engineer when they receive that ticket, fix the problem. Obviously, we're providing all the history and the context, but we're not asking that engineer to be, God view and expect them to remember, chances are they've worked anywhere from 10 to 100 tickets since the last time they maybe worked on that particular issue. We do try to, if it's something within the last week or so that an engineer worked on, getting it back to that same person because they're more likely to have that historical continuity. But heck, I've worked on stuff in the afternoon that I worked on that morning, and enough has happened between then and now. I need my own notes to remember what I did. So we are very, aggressive about our note taking to make sure it gets into the PSA and it's not just head knowledge that if that person is not available or it ends up in someone else's lap, that they do have the benefit of that experience. But the responsibility of the engineer is not to be God view at all times. We try to arm them with all the info we can. We also want them to focus on fixing that particular issue and not necessarily having to worry about piecing together a larger narrative. That person doing the audit or that daily buck, they have more of a 50,000 foot view because they're not concerning themselves with those nuts and bolts fixes. They are more trained to look for the trends, because the type of person or people that we have working on those, they're more likely to remember, that's not on my list, but it was 2 weeks ago. And let me go pull some ticket information. They're not doing the same churn, so it's more fresh even over a greater period of time. I mean, it's anecdotal. I don't have a book on this. These are learned experiences, and we've just found that it's worked particularly well for us and our team, and the makeup of the great team members that we've got, and trying our best to always have the right people in the right seat on the bus and play into those strengths. And an engineer is very, very good at a lot of things. They're incredibly good at a certain list of things, myself included. That person who's more, mentally, leaning towards an auditor's mind, seeing things for the trend and not necessarily the technology. That's a very different mental makeup. It comes more, frankly, from that operational side of the house more than anything. This is not an ops person doing it, but a lot of their other responsibilities are, without going all the way down the rabbit hole, we operate in 3 functional divisions inside of CRS. So there's the engineering group, there's the security and compliance group, and then we have a consulting group. And these checks and audits, ironically enough, come from our consulting group because that seems to be the mental makeup where they're looking at it not just from an engineer's perspective, but from putting themselves in the shoes of the business owner. This machine is having an issue on this exact same day every week. What is the cost of that interruption? What is it doing to their what is it doing to them operationally? The human element is actually very, very important in those regards. So we found a pretty good makeup of, at least for us, how that daily process works, and again, who's driving what components of it.
Very nice, very nice. So let's assume that this storm that's out there right now is not going to get a whole lot worse. Obviously, it's there, and you started to do your tracking. What changed now that this name storm's out there, and then what are the next couple triggers you're going to hit that are going to make you either back away a little bit, or at this point you're engaged? Do you back away until hurricane season's over? What's the play there?
Yeah. So I'll actually start at the end. So we're backing. So these processes never change. We evolve them and add to them, of course. But so that daily process I talked about, for example, that's going to happen all day, whether there's a storm or not.
Okay.
What we enacted today, as I mentioned, is our lightest protocol. And that does not actually have any tangible changes yet to our buck process. But we do have several strategic huddles throughout the company based on role and responsibility. So myself and 2 other, key team members have a morning huddle every single day, actually before the day technically starts, because that's just how my brain works. I'm a early kind of guy. And thank God they both choose to show up every day and join me for it. So we've got ours in the wee hours, as some might consider it. Our two partner teams within the engineering side. So the actual engineers are split up and then into 2 sub teams underneath the engineering side of the house. They have a morning and afternoon huddle, and then there's some other amongst the other divisions as well. When we hit what we enacted today, the topic of the storm is there's mandatory check-ins throughout the huddles. Basically, it's a forced point of conversation. People are talking about already anyway. We had a hurricane 9 months ago, and let's face it, the odds remain low that we're going to be doing that again, but it's still very fresh. So people were going to be talking about it anyway. But if this was 5 years from now and a little bit of Apollo 13 syndrome sets in and things start to feel just a little bit too standard, I'm very mindful of that. So but we're really good at following SOPs when we're told to. Again, we're engineers at the end of the day. So it is part of that procedure that once we have something with in the Atlantic named storm with a track that's leading it towards a general Gulf of Mexico or Caribbean route, that is when that's a topic of discussion. It's normally a 30-second topic of discussion, but it's part of where is it, what's it tracking, what's the latest update. As it gets closer, I'm going to apply a little bit of umbrella principle here. If I sit here and talk to you ad nauseum about this storm, maybe I'm lessening the chances it's actually going to come to us. I'm just going to put out the umbrella and hope it doesn't rain. Pun very much intended. But let's just assume that it was. So fast forward, call it 48, 72 hours. This thing's trucking along the Atlantic, and we're seeing enough of a weather event come off of Texas, it's actually going to cause it to pull a leg that we've seen many, many times. Where you look at a storm right now charging across from Africa, you would be forgiven for thinking every single one of them is going to bowl all the way through Mexico or Texas. What tends to happen is these fronts move in, they grab a leg somewhere around Cuba and come right into our backyard. That is not an uncommon pattern, so it's something we're very mindful of. So fast forward a few days, let's say that's now becoming more of the possibility. We're not in a cone yet, but there are now models putting it in our zone. That does begin to enact some sort of trickles down outside of those huddles. So the very, very first reactionary proactive measure, I guess is the easiest way to put it, is those daily backup checks actually become twice daily. So at that point, we're doing a morning and afternoon check, because under most circumstances, that trigger puts it 5 to 7 days out. We've got about a week to play with at this point. And again, I have no data to back this up. Just my insane logic says a week is enough time for us to really dig in and minimize our threat profile, where we might have some lingering issues here, a VSS writer there, some replication problems, what have you. I like eyes on it every day, especially because these checks, I should have said, normally happen in the mornings, because that gives those engineers time throughout the day to work the tickets that get created. Well, as we all know, sometimes these fixes require after-hours intervention. So the reason for that step up is not so much the second set of eyes. That helps, but it's actually more so the opportunity to collaborate with the engineers and the partners, because that work outside of after hours costs people money. That we have to get permission to use that after hours time. So we're at that point saying, hey, we've got, we see this thing coming. We've enacted these protocols. We've been tracking an ongoing issue. We've been trying to resolve it for you during business hours, which in our model doesn't cost them more. We've worked all you can eat fixed fee agreements. Due to severity of what we see coming, the fastest likely fix for this involves some downtime. Would you like us to either work on it tonight? It's going to cost approximately this. Or is there downtime coming up over lunch or something in the next day or two that we can work on this and take the server down or whatever the device is and get it fixed? We're stepping up our measures to, as quickly as possible, fix whatever lingering problems. If you have enough devices out there backing up at any given time, some percentage of them is going to be having an issue. That you show me 100% green backup board, I will show you a backup board that's not reporting properly. That's just with more than 10 devices on it. I mean, that's just a fact. The law of big numbers kicks in eventually. So that is, I would imagine, again, because of our heightened sensitivity right now, we will likely be enacting that in the next 48 to 72 hours. Enough of the models are going to start to show one of those shifts. They're still projecting that it's going to charge right through the Caribbean and head towards, more the central regions, but we'll probably step it up just because this is our first one of the season. It's frankly a good exercise. I have no problem. Even if there's situations where the partner does not feel, like it's a good spend of after hours money, there have been times where I've authorized it anyway. We pay our people for their after hours time and we just don't charge the partner, because a few dollars here and there is a good spend of money, in my opinion, considering what we just went through. And some of those likewise decisions we made saved some people's bacon in a real way. So those are calls we've not shied. We at the end have a business. We have to be profitable. We have a business to run. But if we got a business over $100, then we have bigger problems that we need to discuss. So that's kind of the next evolution. The third and oftentimes final, because thankfully we have a lot more hurricane scares and we have hurricanes here for now. The third one that we tend to hit is when we hit a cone. So at any given time that our region is, and by region I should say really the Tri-County area here. So for those that are familiar, it's Lee, Collier, and Charlotte County kind of make up our coastline. Like I said, most of our partners are Lee and Collier. We have plenty in Charlotte as well. So anytime those three coastal counties are in a cone meaningfully, or in any way I should say, those twice daily backup checks continue. We're also reaching out to partners, and we've had consultative conversations with our partners about this long before this storm had been coming. They've already told us if they want to be on this list or not. But we have partners, primarily those with on-prem assets. We're very cloud heavy, cloud first. So of our 140 couple partners, the vast majority of them don't have on-premise assets outside of PCs and firewalls. Not a whole lot to worry about there. Plenty to worry about elsewhere, but in that regard, they're good. But for those that do, many of them have given us instructions, or I guess pre-authorization, to reach out when we're in a cone, and we begin running down analyses on, hey, what do we have pre-staged? Do we need to start proactively running, do we need to get a recovery console set up in Azure? Do because our partners, this is where we exit the cookie cutter zone. We've got partners in every configuration you can think of, ones that are direct to cloud and it's purely reactionary. We've got some with, warm standby sitting in Azure ready to go. We've got a couple yet that just have long-standing data center relationships that, we've got replication going to. We don't own or manage anyone's data centers. That's one of our hard stops. But we have partners that do have data center footprints elsewhere that we leverage those tools for. So that the cone is where we start checking down, if they're partners that are doing proactive stuff where they're already doing stuff to Azure or to a data center, that's already covered in our daily backup checks. I should have said we're checking the status of those replications. We're making sure we have recent good recovery to a recovery console or whatever have you. But especially for those that don't, I'll pick on a firm that we have here that's got we'll just call it a substantial on-premise data footprint. This was a lesson learned out of Ian. We had the conversation. I actually was on the call about Wednesday was landfall. It was the Monday before, so give or take 48 hours before landfall. Had the final go no go conversation with them. Hey, if we need to start restoring, the time is now. If your intent is to be up in any reasonable amount of time after the storm, should it come, if we start after the storm, you are days down. Their data footprint is large enough. I could have certain key assets up, but the type of work they do, they need that data to function. So my question for them was simply, is your downtime comfort, if this thing hits Wednesday, maybe I'll have you ready for Monday? Or are you looking to be some kind of functional before the weekend, assuming we have any roads and internet and power left? But let's set all that aside for a second. Do we start it now? So that's an example of one of those conversations. We're preceding where we have permission. Because again, you start spinning stuff up in Azure, dollars start ticking off also. Not to us, but to somebody.
Yep.
So at that point, that's where we put in the client's hands to say, for the partner's hands, where would we, what would you like us to do? And we just check down the list. And that begins once we enter the cone. And we tend to live in cones for 3 to 5 days, depending on the speed and the distance of the storm. If it formed in the Caribbean or the Gulf and is coming right at us, that tends to be a much tighter window. But also, like I've lived through 6 mile an hour storms. I've lived through 16, like horizontal motion. 16, 20 mile an hour storms. They can cover a lot of ground, or they can plod out there for what feels like days. So, but the cone typically gives us a 3 to 5 day window. There are very few environments we can get fully pre-staged somewhere in 3 to 5 days. We don't have partners with 300 terabyte footprints. So like our big ones are still sub 100. So, and that's not all critical data. So we have the ability to get this stuff pre-staged in a meaningful way with that amount of time. So that's, as I mentioned before, typically the last stage we get to, because most storms don't come. The last stage prior to landfall is once we're talking sub 24 hours at this point. We're the center of the cone. Everyone's hunkering down. We effectively, short of a act of God, know it's coming at that point. That's where, at that point, nothing falls off. We're still doing twice daily checks. We've already talked to the partner, and now we're monitoring whatever restores or proactive measures we were given permission to do so. The last and final thing that's enacted, that 24-hour point, is we're contacting those same partners and verifying who's the contact after the storm. Who's the secondary contact after the storm? Not everyone has one, but we ask, who's the tertiary contact after the storm? Because, not to make it doom and gloom, sometimes it's just hard to reach people. And when the cell phone tower is bent over in your backyard, you're not going to be reached by phone anytime soon. So, and ideally, someone on that list is someone who has elected to leave the area. We try to make sure that we have a point of contact that is not staying behind. Because again, the whole point of restoring to a data center in Virginia is that it's not here. Well, if you, the partner, are here and I can't reach you for instructions or permission what to do next, that restore in Virginia hasn't done anybody a whole lot of good other than sit there and wait for you to find cell phone service or power. So those points of it's really, we've done everything technical leading up to that point. It's really, those are the human checks. It's, do you need anything? And sometimes not even technically, just do you need anything? I mean, again, these are people we've typically worked with for a decade plus. They're very important to us. So, human to human, what do you need? Are you safe? Have you or other members of your team elected to leave the area? When should we start post landfall? When would you like us to start attempting to make contact? And the reason for that question might sound weird. It's like, well, why wouldn't you start trying to reach them immediately? Some people tell us flat out, listen, we've closed our doors. We've shuttered everything. Regardless of what happens, we're not coming back for a week. Call us next Wednesday. Those were actual words that several of our partners told us. And they're good people at the end of the day. They want us to prioritize others. They want to tell us, we'll reach out if we need something. If you haven't heard from us by Wednesday, give us a call. I'll tell you right now, we didn't wait a week to call anybody. And that was one of my roles, was I was just calling people because, frankly, no one gave me anything better to do. There's only so many Starlinks you can crawl up on a roof and set up. So that was, anyway. But what we do ask, when would you like us to reach out? And typically it's on the other end of that, which is, most are, hey, if they're projecting a 5 p.m. landfall, and this is all under the guise of, not the guise, but safety comes first, and our team knows that. Our partners know that's our stance. None of our team members are expected to do anything in the events during or immediately after the storm. We have team members that live outside the area for a lot of reasons. We've been doing that long since before COVID made it cool. And part of that was our disaster recovery and business continuity stance. We have a minimum of one team member from each of our operation divisions outside the area. We have multiple systems engineers. We have an administrative person. We have a compliance and consult. We have someone who fills a role that lives full time outside of the cone. And part of that is we serve this public record. So I can just say it. We have the honor of serving several of our local fire departments. And that is an example of, we don't ask when they want us to call. We're actually on with them. One of my right-hand people happens to work out of Wisconsin. Less during Ian, but during Hurricane Irma years before, not as dramatic of an impact. So more systems were online throughout. He was on the phone with several of those departments during the height of the storm, helping them keep different key systems operational so that when the storm finally passed, they could hit the streets with zero downtime and just immediately get to work doing what they have to do. So that's a key component for us also, is it's mandatory that we maintain those out of area presences. But our team also knows, if you want to leave, just leave. And it's not leave and go set up a laptop somewhere. We expect you to get back to work. Most of them do, because again, we've got some great humans here. But there is no, well, I don't care. You have to get somewhere and make sure you're plugged in, because we need people answering phones. I can answer a phone as good as anybody else. Go take care of your kids. Go take care of your family. Do what you have to do. That's just human. So that all happens. Like, when we're at that 24-hour part, those are the conversations we're having. So like I said, if there's technical questions left for us to solve at 24 hours, this process has already fallen down. We've made missteps. There's no restore we're kicking off, and we've done a few. We've been, because then they decided, oh crap, this is for real. Remember that thing we told you not to do? Can you go spin up that Azure thing for us? We've done it. They were ready 48 hours after the storm was gone, but hey, at least they got a 24-hour head start. We don't tell people no, but we've long since had those conversations. If we're having the first conversation at 24 hours, we've already failed our own process. So I know that was a lot at once, but these were a lot of things that no one had genius light bulb moments. They're all 98.4% of them are born out of mistakes we've made in the past, and all we can do is look in the mirror and say, we're not doing that again.
So, obviously you mentioned Ian and you mentioned Irma, actually, and hopefully we don't run out of names this year. But was there any lessons learned from Ian that you guys are taking into this year? Something new that came up?
Absolutely. How do I put this? We won't be asking as softly about those proactive restores. We tend to our own detriment, do the whole put ourselves in their shoes, treat it like it's our own, their budgets are our budgets. And again, transparent to a fault, we're too respectful of that sometimes, when part of what they pay us to do is say, I get it, you don't want to spend this money. Here's the 3 reasons why you need to do this now. And the funny part is our partners already expect that from them. They didn't ask us not to do it. It's just we get in our own way sometimes. And we openly did that in a couple of occasions where it was like, hey, we feel you got a big footprint when you start restoring now. Well, what's that going to cost? I'd really prefer, we don't know if it's coming yet. And then once we press go, the dollars start ticking off. Can we just catch up on this afternoon? Hey, your call, totally understand. One of the biggest lessons I learned is I'm going to ask twice, 3 times, maybe 4. No, seriously, we already asked twice, as I just explained. I'm not going to push go without someone's permission. It's still their business. It's still their budget, still their dollars. They may just have a comfort level with being down, and that part's not my business. But being the appropriate amount of forceful to say, I just want to make sure you clearly understand, if we don't do this and this happens, this is your realistic expectation, be it 24 hours, 3 days, a week. And where does that align with your risk tolerance? I've got a CPA firm, 20-year partnership. They predate me by over a decade. They told me point blank, John, if we have no power, if we have no internet, if we have no phones, we're not doing anybody's taxes. So if we're down for a week, we're down for a week. But all that money we just, and that's just their mindset. They, of course, are very risk averse to losing that data. They lose one tax return, they're out of business. So that is very important. But not for them, the comfort level is knowing they can recover. The speed at which they can recover, they're an old established, their partners have been around longer than they've been with us. They're all leaving town anyways, is their philosophy. They'd rather be fiscally conservative and just not spend the dollars and deal it on the back end. Totally respect and understand it. I'm still going to bring it up twice. I'm still going to ask the 3rd time because I'm me, and I already know what they're going to say. But there are others where I just, in my opinion, and I won't know until we get to do this the next time, whenever that is, not if, it is my intent to just, again, with the appropriate amount of force, push a little bit harder on, are you sure? Do you understand? Just making it unemotional. How many days are you prepared to be down after the storm? And based on that, help me calibrate where we need to start. Maybe we don't kick it off 5 days before, but can I get your permission to go ahead and kick it off at the 24-hour mark? Because again, we can be in the middle of the hurricane. Whatever data center your Cove data is sitting in is restoring to a data center of Microsoft's somewhere else in the country. Neither of those places are affected by this incident. The whole time we're dealing with nonsense, that restore can be running. But if you wait until after, now we're all dealing with picking up the pieces. And now, very selfishly, we're having to worry about kicking off somebody's restore in the middle of, frankly, a few other things that are, hate to say it, equally important, like where are we going to find water? So these are not normal circumstances when the thing happens. So that's...
John, I really, really appreciate that. That's great depth. I think that was wonderful. I'm sure the audience is going to enjoy hearing, a lot of that, make them question, are they doing enough in some of those conditions as well? Post-E, and how far out did you have to go before you had, your companies, your customers, your partners working, back off of their production systems and no longer impacted by Ian? Was that a 2-month impact? Was it a 6-month impact, or are you still being impacted by it?
Two key things. I'll touch on that one. One's
Sure.
real easy. I'm happy to say, in the weirdest way, 'cause it's been about 9 months, we spun down our last Ian virtual machine in the cloud that was coming back last week. It took 9 months for some, and that's because their buildings didn't exist anymore. Or at least most of them didn't. The one I'll never forget standing in the server room, and the high water mark was, I'm kind of a tall guy. The high water mark was 3 feet above my head. That took time. They got a lot of shiny new equipment out of it, but that took time. We completed that a week ago. The reason I said those that are coming back is I guess maybe Microsoft stock is doing well. I don't know. We frankly took the opportunity to consult with each partner individually. Guys, we got you in the cloud. Do you need to come back? Like, do we need to do this all over again? Do we need to buy servers? Do we, maybe they were dragging, maybe they were waiting for end of life, maybe they were waiting for a life cycle, maybe they just couldn't let go of the football. Everyone has their reasons. I am a self-proclaimed server hugger for years that has no servers left in his building and was really happy about it 9 months ago. So I obviously won't say all, because some do. There are business cases or logistical purposes for having on-premise equipment. I'll be the first one to admit that also. But we very intentionally had a conversation with every single partner that had to go to the cloud as some direct result of Ian, to have the conversation about what coming back would look like. And equally important, do you need to? And whether that was making those virtual machines in Azure a permanent fixture, or a lateral move from a Azure-based environment to SharePoint, some other, depending on the solution and the need. It wasn't even quite 50-50. I'd say we safely brought back 75% of what went up there. But when over 75% of our partner base is thankfully now already fully cloud-based, that was still a pretty big chunk of our remaining on-premise that never came back. And when I think about it, going back to your question about what we learned and looking ahead moving forward, it has been our tenet for years, but never more focused. Minimize. We're not there to eliminate it yet. I'm a realist. We're just not. But minimize where we can those on-premise exposures, because every single one that gets out of the building is one less thing that we're tracking down, the days, the hours, the minutes before the storm, and then the days and the hours that feel like weeks after the storm. And it's a win for them. A selfish guy, at the end of the day, it's a big win for us too, to not have to worry about that each and every one.
Okay, so guys, hopefully that had some, a lot of information in there, a lot of preparation, a lot of lessons learned in the field that John shared with you guys. That recording will be made available on our MSP Institute. If you guys want to come back and check that out, you can get access to that, or you can reach out to me directly, and I can see if I can get you links to that before it gets produced out into our MSP Institute. The links for the MSP Institute in the handout document inside of GoToWebinar called Nerd Links. As well, there is a bunch of other additional Cove resources there that are available for you. If you have been attending my other boot camps, you'll notice that handout document is a consistent document that I have in all of my boot camps, all of my office hours. So if you pulled it from a session in the last 6 months, there's really no new links on there at this time, okay? I just want to wrap up with one final image here before we move into the health check portion of the session. And this was an image from wreckage in Fort Myers in late April 2023, so about 7 months after this hurricane came through. It resonated with me a lot when John said, he was standing in a server room and the water surge mark, or the high water mark, was about 3 feet above him. So I'm estimating, probably 8 to 9 feet up there. So definitely some devastating impact there, and I'm glad that John and his team got through that safe, and they were able to get their customers back up and running, albeit taking some time to get them back into their facilities. So from a health check perspective, I wanted to put together a checklist of common missteps or concerns that I would see as I talk to partners, things that we identify either at the time of data recovery or post-recovery. Hey, we don't know what this information was. This is missing. This wasn't properly recorded someplace, or wasn't stored properly to either enable the recovery or cause the recovery to be slowed down in some states or in some situations. Not every partner is going to have these type of missteps or missing information, but it's a good checklist to compare against your organization and see, are you ticking all of these boxes, or is there a potential gap that could be exposed, while the customer's waiting for you to get his data back. So from a documentation perspective, I'm kind of old school. I like having a physical notebook sitting next to me as I'm working on something system-wise, build, what have you, to take notes about what I'm doing, configurations, the password that I entered into the system, those kind of things. what patches, what updates, what's my next set of steps and operations. Obviously, a paper document's not going to do me any good in the event of a 9 foot tall ocean surges. So having it digital, having it something that's in a documentation system stored off site makes a lot more sense. A lot of this stuff you can capture automatically with the various RMM and documentation and PSA and password management tools you guys have at your disposal, but making sure that you've got this kind of information for your protected systems, for your managed systems, whether they're backup protected or not, could be beneficial. Hardware manufacturer, model, configuration, CPU, RAM, video, serial number, warranty information, how it's configured, BIOS, UEFI, the firmware version, how are your disk arrays built, drive letters, shares and permissions, all that kind of stuff important to you if you get into a situation where you've got to rebuild that system, where you're going to virtualize that system versus leaving it physical, or you've got to introduce a warranty claim or choose to buy some replacement hardware that's going to match up fairly close to what you had previously. So lots of reasons to have this information documented clearly in your environment. And I'd expect most of you to have this for most of your systems, but do you have it for all of your systems? IP addresses, network credentials, those kind of things. Trying to remember this or find the technician that set it up, years after it was originally deployed could be a challenge in some situations. Just like you're going to have your password stored, have your backup encryption keys, your BitLocker encryption keys, those stored and managed in the system as well in case you need those. Document your selections, your exclusions for backup. What are you protecting? What are you not protecting? What's your base retention? It's defined so that you can go back at a glance in your documentation system and see what am I protecting and how long am I protecting it for? What's my archiving schedule? Those kind of things. Am I conforming to it? Those Excel spreadsheets that John mentioned he used to track is a great form of documentation, not just proving of what he's protecting, but that he's got it historically protected in his system. So it doesn't have to be a auto-generated system. It just needs to be a consistent, trackable system that you're utilizing. In all of these sections, my last couple bullets here, tell us what you missed in the question section. So if there is something that you want to call out, something that I'm not thinking of inside of documentation, once again, I'm an Enable employee. I work with Cove, and I can collect a lot of this information based on my interactions with partners and their successful recoveries and or failed recoveries from data loss. If I miss something completely or something that you disagree with, please call me out on it, call BS, or just add some additional context or color to any of these. I'd love to have that feedback. It'll help make this that much more accurate as I expand it for partners going forward. Okay? Platform security. Some common issues and resolutions here, and this might exist at the management layer for your backup and recovery, but it can also be applied against your other tools inside of your management stack, or at your customer's location across their software stack and their line of business applications. So strongly encourage separate user credentials for things like backup, RMM, and PSA. While you can utilize the Enable SSO to get single logins across all the various Enable tools, you could also set up different email addresses so that you've got different logins to those tools. While it might be a little bit less convenient, it also means that you've got different user credentials blocking access to those other components, and you can truly utilize least privilege access. And ensure that if something is compromised on one platform, it's not necessarily going to be compromised on the others. Other things you'll want to think about here is named users only. Don't create knock accounts where all of your technicians can log in under the same user in order to perform actions. That's just a problem waiting to happen. It doesn't give you a good audit trail to see which user, made a change, diverged from process, or made a mistake, or maliciously deleted something even. Limit your number of security officers, your super users, those high-level admins, so that they don't have the rights unless they need them. And if they do, once again, think about least privilege. Give them a high-level user account they can use when they need it, but let their daily driver be something that's more of a read-only, a monitoring, or day-to-day type of tasks level set of permissions. Consider monitoring and restricting your API level access, turning off API access when you don't need it, or ensuring that the API access credentials are read-only credentials for pulling reporting and alerting, but maybe not actionable super user level credentials that could be used to delete devices or make significant changes to devices. Monitor your users, demote your users. This can be done manually or through the API inside of Cove, but you would want to think about this for all of your applications, to be honest. Enforce your MFA. It's on by default inside of Cove. You can't turn it off for more than a single log out, log back in session to change devices. But look at that. Ensure that it's in place in your other tools, and think about MFA across your customer base also. Having that in place can help prevent a lot of the things that the data loss events that would require you to rely on Cove to get the data back. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Don't log in from untrusted customer devices. Obviously, you don't want to have your credentials or your access compromised just as much as your customers don't want to have their systems compromised. So control how you log in. All of the things you enforce for your customers, enforce for your own devices internally. Password managers, I can't say enough about utilizing a password manager. You should be using them. Your customers should be utilizing them. Strong passwords and zero password reuse where possible. Change your passwords regularly if that's within the scope, although having strong passwords and zero reuse, you can get by with less frequent changes. Some say that with those kind of things in place and MFA, you really don't have to change passwords unless they do show up in a breach list, and that too frequent rotation of them will cause less secure passwords to be created, where people just shift them by a bit or a number or a character to be able to remember those. Remember to log out. Another really common thing here, but I've seen cases where MSPs and their customers have been compromised by bad actors after they were on the other side of their MFA. They already logged into an application, then they managed to inadvertently grant access to a bad actor who was able to go in and cause significant damage. Now, there are a whole series of immutable features inside of Cove that help prevent these type of things as well, and allow you to roll back from accidental deletion or configuration changes, audits to see what's been modified. But once again, why rely on those and why have to go to those? Once again, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. Client security. Inside of Cove, there are several things you can do to improve client-level security. Obviously, if you're using local backup settings, those can be adjusted on the local backup device. You need local admin-level access today with Cove in order to edit or change those. But local admin access can be granted fairly easy through permission and credential elevation exploits. So you can utilize things such as profiles to lock out selections and schedules, so they can only be changed from the management console, not from the local device. You can set GUI passwords to block the Cove user interface on the local machine. And you can completely disable that UI from being able to be accessed remotely as a third option there. So it's all remotely managed via profile and remote command. Obviously, if you're utilizing private key encryption where you own or manage the keys, then that means zero knowledge from an enable perspective. But if you're utilizing our system managed encryption keys, then those are controlled by the console. And in that case, there's single-use encryption keys that are generated or passphrases that are generated, and they expire after that use or within 24 hours if not utilized. Other things to think about, when you utilize a NAS device for your local speed vault, use it in a workgroup type of configuration as opposed to adding that NAS to your domain or a share on the domain. That way a bad actor or a ransomware or something that's jumping the network and that has access to the domain doesn't have access to that workgroup level attached speed vault. And that's going to give you a lot of benefit. Now you've got a deduped, encrypted, and compressed copy of your Cove backup data that can be restored at LAN speed versus WAN speed. More parallel restores, things of that nature. See a couple questions that are coming through here, and just in the sense of time, I probably will address those at the end of the session if time is allowing, or I'll reach out to you guys directly on that one for a couple of these, okay? Data selections. This is a place I see a lot of potential issues. Partners are only protecting, one type of data or one type of resource. They're only doing the M365. They're only doing the servers. They're only doing the workstations inside of Cove. Maybe they've got another third-party product that backs up differently. But you want to make sure that you've got something in place and that it is sending data offsite. It has immutable features. Ideally, while you don't want all of your eggs in one basket, it is nice being able to go to one dashboard and see that all of your data is protected. So I recommend ensuring that you've got protection for all of your servers and workstations from within Cove, and that you're not being plagued by incomplete selections or aggressive exclusions. Excluding everything but the user profiles directories, or inadvertently missing volumes. Maybe you've only got the boot volume selected, but you've got a D, E, and F that have been added to that system later. You want to be able to capture those additional volumes and let you know specifically that you want to exclude them, and then of course document that, right? It could be missing file paths. Maybe you've made selections where it was just C users that you're protecting, and you don't have enough data now to rebuild the system. You've just got user data in the My Documents directories and the downloads and things of that nature. Or you're missing data sources. You've selected file system, but you aren't doing an actual VSS backup of your Microsoft SQL, or you haven't put credentials into your MySQL database to capture it in a quiescent state, or you're not getting a full system state backup, which would allow you to do a bare metal or a virtual recovery. You're just getting the C and the D drive at a file system level. While better than nothing, doesn't give you that full system recovery option. Data retention, things to think about here. The default version of Enable backup products starts out with our all-in product. That's a 28-day rotating calendar-based retention model. But inside of Cove, you can set up custom product retention up to 365 days, and then you have optional archive rules that can be enabled. Most partners don't take advantage of those archives. And honestly, a lot of them don't take advantage of the extended retention even, but it does give you more rollback points. You can also think about more frequent backups as well. And those frequent backups mean that you're not looking at a 24-hour or 48-hour last restore point. If there was a problem, you could get to the last hour or 4 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours ago, depending on the needs of your customer and the available bandwidth. What you want to do is look at the average backup runtime for your devices, and then think about adjusting the frequency so that it aligns with what your average runtime or cooperates with your average runtime. So if you're getting your backup of file and folder and system state in under 15 minutes, why not set this thing down to an hourly backup? That way you've got a lot less potential for data loss if you had to go to the last point in time to get the system back up and running. Monitoring of your Cove backups, also something that I'll see partners hit or miss. Some partners in here are in here religiously on a daily basis, looking at their dashboards, tracking the problems, digging in deeper, triaging those, flagging them. Maybe they've got monitoring in their RMM and PSA where those tickets and those alerts are being created and elevated up, or they're using a combination of those two. Ideally, though, you want to make sure that you're monitoring most likely on a daily basis, and that you know kind of your general success percentages. Are you at 95% success rates? How many of your devices backed up in the last 24 hours successfully? What's server online? What are your workstation and your laptops online counts versus employees taking a long vacation or a long 7-day or 9-day vacation? And I say 9-day because you've got your work week, your leading and trailing weekends. So you may not be concerned about a workstation being offline for until you hit that 10th day possibly. But knowing your last success times and your ratios is a great way to be able to track, even if you don't know individual machines. Knowing on an everyday metric, what is my KPI here? Am I at above 90, above 92, above 95%? Is a great thing to know. A lot of partners don't use the email views or the email reports actively inside of the console. It allows you to manage by exception and only look at devices that have problem characteristics that you define. A failed local speed vault, hasn't checked in more than X number of hours based on operating system type, selected size is above or below a certain threshold, the amount of change rate above or below a certain threshold. So lots of good ways to filter on failures or odd behaviors. And then if you're not monitoring inside of your RMM, then yeah, you want to think about utilizing the backup checks that are already in place, or some of the advanced scripting capabilities working with me, and some of the new monitoring technologies that I've been building out. Without monitoring, it's kind of a hit or miss. You have to wait till a customer calls, and then at that point go to see, well, do we have a good backup of these systems he's talking about? Recovery testing. This is the only real sales component in this particular session. And the reason I talk about recovery testing here is it's something that is not done frequently enough, but you probably have a requirement for it, or it's a situation that you could sell this to your customers and pull in more revenue. Maybe you're doing some of this automatically for your partners and you've built it into your various plans. You can do it a couple different ways. We've got both automated and manual recovery testing capabilities in the product. We've got things that utilize enable hosted resources within region that'll create a virtual machine from your file system and system state backups, boot them, screenshot them, and email them out. And then we have free resources that can be used to do that as well. Our standby image, our recovery testing, our recovery console, our virtual disaster recovery, all of that technology is available to test your backups and provide some kind of proof of performance. That equivalent of your refrigerator light coming on when you open it to assume that, yes, your milk is going to be cold, right? Several different options here. I'd be more than happy to talk to you in depth on that one or take you through it if you want to schedule some time with me directly. We can talk about how you might build that out. Excuse me. We can talk about how you might build that out inside of your infrastructure or in your customer's location to not only give the test, but to also have those standby proactive recovery environments that could be spun up at a moment's notice. Now, recovery planning. This is something that John has done a lot of, and you need to do this with each and every one of your customers, with each and every one of their devices. You want to build out understanding of what the allowable downtime per key application, per system, per user is. You're define a recovery time objective, not a SLA, but an objective. Understand the data size, the available bandwidth, whether you're going to look at this as a business or mission critical item, and then prioritize it based on how you would restore it, proactively or reactively. Excuse me there, little broken up. Also, you need to think about recovery location. In the event of data loss, you lose the site, you lose the hardware. Where are you going to recover this? You're going to recover it on-prem to replacement hardware, to a cloud, to an alternate location, a secondary data center. Is it going to go, are you going to have physical access, power, bandwidth to do that, restore? Would it go to new hardware, to a hypervisor, to a cloud someplace? And then, of course, if it were ransomware or a burnout motherboard or a disk array, or a RAID controller, are you going to fix it? Are you going to fail over? Are you going to try to replace it on the fly after you get approval from your customer to miss the SLA potentially? If you are failing over, well, that's great, but if the employees are all in the office and the hardware is now in the cloud, how do they get to it? Do you have remote access and VPNs and user laptops accessible or available, assuming the employees even have power and internet access? Will they be able to get to these failed over systems? All things to think about as you're building out that recovery plan for those various systems. When it comes to the recovery event, and you've actually had that failure, and the customer's on the other line asking, "Hey, we see this storm coming through, or we've had a fire or a flood, or the sprinklers went off for no reason and flooded our data center. Help me get back up and running." Well, at that point, what do? Well, if it's a natural disaster or related type of event, you probably want to start by inventorying your lost systems, your damaged systems, probably notifying your insurance providers or your customers' insurance providers, keeping logs of all of the damaged hardware so it can be replaced with like components. Having those serial numbers and models and configurations is great to determine, are you going for like equipment, or are you going to end up ordering and upgrading to go to newer generation, newer operating system versions as you build these things out. Turn your data loss event into a upgrade event also, so you're not just back to square one. You want to prioritize your systems for recovery, which ones have to be on first, and that was part of your planning. But now you want to compare your planning to which systems are actually impacted, and then readjust for things that have changed since you did your initial planning phases. Prioritize your data for recovery, meaning that you might not want to recover the entire 8 terabyte domain controller slash user share. Just pull back the domain controller and some of the recent projects to get it back up and running quickly, and then move on to other high critical data sets before you start to restore all of the historical data that may not be used on a daily basis. If you're going reactive, your procedure is going to be different than proactive. Obviously, you've got to, in a reactive state, determine or procure a location because you didn't think to have that ahead of time. You haven't paid for it or bought the additional hardware. So maybe you're going to go to a cloud because you can't get the hardware in time. There's a supply chain issue, or the customer doesn't have the budget. You're waiting on the check from the insurance provider, those kind of things. But traditionally in these scenarios, you're going to restore the most recent good backup to get the system up and running, which is why you want to have those daily restore points that are accessible. Hardware failures, natural disasters, those kind of things, last known good backup is probably ideal. If it's proactive, you've already got a VM sitting out there someplace, or a standby system sitting someplace. You're going to want to connect to it, VPN, or open up access to the remote data center, start some systems, update DNS, boot your VMs, check connectivity, and get your customer back up and running. Although it should be noted that failing over does imply the need to eventually fail back. So you'll want to start to run backups on these new systems and determine what makes more sense. Do you wait and restore directly to replacement hardware? Do you replace the failed component? Or do you truly fail over and then schedule that fail back at some convenient time for both you and your customer? In a ransomware or malware type of event, you're going to want to recover a little bit differently. Using the right tool for the job, obviously. So if you can restore files and folders, or a directory, or a volume and application, that's great. If it makes sense for the type of data loss. One of the first things, though, you're probably going to want to do is lock down the environment to prevent further exposure or infection. If all the machines have not been compromised, you don't want this to run rampant across the rest of the network or compromise you as you're working on coming in and trying to resolve the issues for the customer. You're probably going to contact the cyber insurance providers to find out what their requirements are. Do you have to preserve the environment to look at source and how the bad actor got in? Can you format those drives and restore from backup, or do you have to restore to a cloud environment and preserve that chain of evidence in this kind of scenario? Maybe you're going to contact an attorney or a legal department. You're going to bring additional resources in if you've got a lot of systems to restore and you just don't have the manpower for it, because you've got to prioritize certain customers over others, or all of your customers at one time if it was a large organized attack. Preserving the environment might mean that you can't restore to those laptops and to those servers. You have to pull the hard drives out of those systems, replace those hard drives, and then recover the machines. Or you might have to restore to different hardware or to a cloud environment while that environment's being reviewed. Also, while it's not your data, it's your customer data, and while it may not be your choice to pay or not pay the ransom, sometimes that's exactly what the customer or the partner wants to do. And whether you help your partner or not to pay a ransom, that may be their best bet or their only bet if there aren't good backups and recoverable configurations in place, or they don't have all of their data protected. Or some of their on-premise data was damaged or destroyed, their on-premise backups were wiped out due to the ransomware, things of that nature. So obviously, if you don't help the customer get back from the ransomware, they'll find somebody to help pay that ransom. They will. Can't guarantee you they'll actually get the data back by paying the ransom, but I've seen cases where that's actually been faster or a better chance of potential success because they didn't have all of their server backups protected the same way they had their workstations, and some stuff was only on-prem, some stuff was off-site, those kind of scenarios. Identifying your known good restore point is also very critical here. You don't want to spend a lot of time to restore last night's backup if that was also compromised. So doing some set test or sample restores first to ensure when was it impacted first, restoring in an isolated environment, testing it after the recovery before you bring it up and reconnect it to the network to ensure that the bad actors are not still in, systems are not compromised, and just waiting this out. Ideally, the choice to fail over, to clean and restore, or wipe and recover is really up to you and your customer. But sometimes doing it the right way may take longer, but might prevent you from doing that same restores a second or third time because you were rushed trying to get back up and running very quickly. Once again, the right kind of restore for the right kind of data loss. So we are just about at time here. I've got just, I think, 2 slides here that I want to wrap up with, maybe 3 before we wrap. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, I'll get you guys back to your day. Post-recovery, as I said, if you're failing over, you're going to have to do certain things. Configure the networks, update DNS, maybe configure a VPN and let your users connect into this environment. You'll then want to schedule that hardware replacement, the failback, the repair, the warranty support. And then before you do actually fail back over, test that repair, test that new hardware, make sure it's working the way you expect. Otherwise, you could fail over and have to fail back immediately to that virtualized environment. And it's an option, but it's inconvenient. It makes you guys look a little bit less professional in that process. You want to fail back in a controlled environment where there aren't any hiccups or unexpected events. If it were ransomware, after the recovery, before you bring the customer back over to it, before you put them into a live network, scan for dormant malware, check for infections, for corruption before you bring it in, and if you find problems, roll it back to an earlier point. Or start out by rolling back to a farther back known good point, and then start to roll it forward selectively till you find the point that you want to stop. Post-restore, confirm your connectivity, your applications, your data, make sure that you restart your backup operations either in the virtualized environment or the cloud or in the new fail-back environment, so that you can continue to have ongoing protection. I've seen that misstep a handful of times where there was a failover and they just never turned back up on for some reason again. You want to make sure you're continuing to protect your partners and customers as they move forward following recovery. So, the next actions here, or the action for you guys, is really to see about scheduling a health check. So this QR code will give you a link to my Calendly schedule at about 6 to 8 weeks. And you can schedule some time where we can go in and look at your devices, run through kind of a similar health check here, look at errors, concerns, misconfigurations, or things that I might see that might look out of the norm. To get a better feel for how successful you might be in the event of a recovery. And we can expand that to talk about anything else Cove or data protection related that you like as well during that session. This link that's linked to this QR code is also in the handout document. So go ahead and snap that now if you'd like it, or just download the handout and you'll have that should you want to schedule those sessions. Let's see, upcoming training events, QR code here, this link also in the handout. These are additional nerd boot camps, office hour sessions by the 7 head nerds here at Enable, sales and marketing, remote monitoring and management, security, so lots of different nerds with different specialties that can help you to increase overall success within your managed environment and improve that relationship with the product and with your customer. Finally, head nerd blogs. All the nerds do contribute to the various blogs, so this will get you through, the latest patch updates or changes in the market or Microsoft security fixes, things of that nature. The QR code here, once again, links in the handout. So that's really all I have for you guys today. I've just got a final pop-up slide or pop-up poll for you guys, kind of where I sing for my supper a little bit. So the question is, how valuable did you find this type of information? Having a customer testimonial talking about his scenarios and some guidance around the health checks and what you should be looking at to ensure that you are protecting your environment successfully. To download those checklists, those various items and missteps that you can look at in those various categories, I've got just a 10 or 15 slide excerpt from this presentation as a PDF for you guys that you can utilize, once again, with your customers inside of your organization. So I'll let you get back to your day. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to speaking with you on a future office hours or Head Nerd Bootcamp in the future. Thanks and have a great day.